Morning and good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Kayla Isabel, and I'm the CEO here at Startup Canada. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which I am on today is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We also acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous people of this country. I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are residing on today. Over the month of March, in celebration of International Women's Day, Startup Canada, our startup communities across Canada, leading women entrepreneurs, government, and industry partners are all coming together to celebrate the contributions and achievements of women entrepreneurs in the Canadian economy. Today, we are so excited to present our final and most popular webinar of the month, Funding for Women Entrepreneurs, Opportunities in 2021. I think we all know that a lot of the research points to women entrepreneurs in Canada being less likely to seek growth financing, including equity capital, and really struggling with, one, identifying what funds are out there for women entrepreneurs, and then actually being successful in accessing them. Today, we're going to be walking through a number of funding opportunities available for women entrepreneurs with a fabulous panel focusing on how to find the best funding options for your business. We're also joined by the fabulous Brooke from BDC, who's going to walk us through some Funding 101 and walk us through some of the supports that BDC has in place as well. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. We want you to ask questions. We want this to be a space that is very helpful for you and your business. And often, a question that you have is probably a question another woman entrepreneur has throughout today's session. So please use the chat function that you'll see on the bottom of your screen and click Panelists and Attendees to make sure that all of us can see those questions and ask throughout the sessions. We will have a formal Q&A at the end at around 45 after the hour. So we'll make sure that those questions are answered at the end. I want to take a moment to say thank you to our incredible co-presenting partners of our Startup Women program, Sovereign Insurance and BDC, as well as our national partners, UPS, Scotiabank, Inniskillin, PayPal, and EDC for making Startup Women a possibility. I am honored to introduce our first expert guest speaker, Brooke Gordon of BDC. Brooke has a background working with small businesses, large companies, and government institutions, where she has almost 20 years of experience as a consultant and manager supporting organizations in strategic planning and affecting change. She combines her problem-solving background in engineering with years of professional development investing in organizational behavior and human health to develop tailored solutions that focus on what matters most to her clients, developing a clear plan of action to meet their goals while sustaining a healthy work-life integration. She is dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs as well, which is incredible. And she's taught both the final year capstone course in consulting at McMaster University and is a personal coach for women who are sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I love that, Brooke. It's such a great, great space. I think we can all agree that we could all use a bit of coaching on that these days. Thank you so much for being here, Brooke. And without further ado, I pass the digital stage over to you. You might just have to quickly unmute your microphone.
We there now?
Fabulous. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kayla, for the introduction, and it's great to be here today. So I know we're looking forward to a wonderful panel on funding for women entrepreneurs, but I wanted to start off today with a little bit of a different conversation. Now, we know from our research that financial management is one of the leading causes of business failures. And why am I starting out with this? Well, because it's never been truer than in these difficult times. A survey of Canadian small business owners showed that almost all of them believe that on average, they have a good understanding of financial management in principle. And yet only 7% were actually able to answer the accompanying study and get the answers correct. So what this really says to me is that understanding the concept is much easier than putting it into practice. Now, what matters most is what that sounds like when I'm talking to business owners. So I hear things like, my business is doing well, but there's never enough cash. My sales are up, but my profits are decreasing and I don't know why. I don't understand what my accountant is talking about. Or the one that actually breaks my heart is when business owners tell me, I just file my annual reports. I trust that my accountant will tell me if something is wrong. Now at BDC, we have, which is the Business Development Bank of Canada, we have 62,000 Canadian entrepreneurs that we're able to help. And for me, that also means 62,000 excellent stories to tell. And I want to share one of those with you today. Colleen Rhodey is the owner of Vision Tech Systems, a company in Mississauga, Ontario that offers customers a wide range of security equipment and systems. A few years ago, the company was growing very fast. And believe it or not, that was a problem for Colleen. So Vision Tech experienced frequent cash crunches, and Colleen was suffering through sleepless nights. Cash was tight because she was pouring all the company's money into hiring people and expanding the business. Sounds great, but the problems were actually that she was bidding too low to obtain the contracts she needed, and some of her larger customers were consistently paying late. So something definitely had to change. Colleen turned to a BDC financial coach who helped her get a handle on her company's finances. Her coach helped her to better understand Vision Tech's finances, get the business's cash flow under control. And so the first thing that she did was she set up a cash flow planner to help anticipate times of tight cash flow and be able to plan for the projects and financing needs. The result? Well, she's got a more solid company. She's definitely better positioned for growth. But the part that really meant a lot to me is when Colleen told us that her stress is much less. Now, BDC is a project-based lender. We're a complementary lender to the other banks. And here you can see an illustration on this slide of what the hidden costs of purchasing a real estate deal might look like. But I want to give you another example. In the past few weeks, I've spoken to a few different estheticians who wanted to start a medical beauty clinic. One of them, she had a nursing background and she wanted to buy a laser for treatment, and she was debating between the cost to lease or buy. Now, that's a great question, but I also wanted to know about the other costs. What are going to be the setup expenses, like electrical work required? What about additional insurance? What about training, maintenance costs? Not to mention the hit to her cash flow because she needed to be not working with her clients, which is where she brings in her money, but instead spending time to learn and configure and bring the equipment into full service. So our advice is to bring in a cash flow forecast. It's a way of being able to predict the total cost of the project. And we want to see an optimistic scenario, not just the pessimistic one. It's important to do both. And that's exactly what Colleen had done as well. She was able to ensure that she could cover the full cost of all her projects. And she knew about the contingencies, and especially the working capital required to bring her projects to completion, because that's when she'd be able to put it into practice to start bringing in new payments. So I wanted to share those two examples with you to give you an idea of how cash flow just keeps coming in to the conversation around financing. Now, when I speak with business owners, I actually think there's a real misconception about the use of debt versus equity to finance their business. So if it's okay with you, Kayla, I want to spend just 1 or 2 minutes to quickly explain the difference between them. Now, we're probably familiar with debt. So from a consumer perspective, you may have a line of credit or overdraft at the bank, and these are good for short-term purchases. You may also have a mortgage on a property. And I'm writing in or calling in from my home. This is my home office. And so having a consistent payment over a longer term. Well, financing through big box stores, that's another example. Maybe a department credit card. I know I have one. It's how I save up some points to buy some new clothes. It's my favorite part of the perk of that. But you have access to these same types of debt as a business owner and a few more. So a term loan, which you might hear us talk about today, it's almost like a mortgage, but it's typically for a larger project or a piece of equipment, something that has a very longer life. You might hear the word a longer depreciation cycle. There's also trade credit that's available from suppliers that allows you to be invoiced and then delay your payment by anywhere from 30 to 60 days, perhaps. And there's a couple others as well. Now, family and friends, they may offer you money as a loan. So to avoid misunderstanding, it's really important to have a formal written agreement specifying the terms of the loan, repayment requirements, terms of interest. Equity is a little different. It's an exchange of funds for shares in the company or as a partner. Now, you usually hear the term venture capital, maybe angel investing or VC. There's no repayment plan. Instead, they're taking a risk that your business will be successful. So equity financing, it can come from friends and family as well who want to be part of your business, either active in it or as a silent partner. And again, I can't stress this enough, but it's one of those times you definitely want to seek legal advice to draw up agreements. Now, both debt and equity have advantages and disadvantages. One major benefit of debt equity that's sometimes overlooked is that business debt creates tax deductions. So at the early stages, this may not seem that important to you, but as you continue to grow your business, well, then it starts having a positive impact because you've got revenues that you'll be able to offset against. The most significant disadvantage of using debt is that it requires repayment, no matter how well you're doing or not. So to avoid this, I've met many women who told me that they cashed in their RRSPs or they got a second mortgage. And so what they've done is taken their personal assets and transferred them over to the business as equity. And this is the scenario I want to talk about for just a moment. In the case of debt, a lender wants to minimize the risk in the event that you're unable to repay, because that's a real reality for us. They want to evaluate the assets that you're willing to pledge as collateral to secure a loan. And this is where the concept of leverage comes in. So those RRSPs or the home equity, that could have been used to borrow against, in which case you get to keep the cash that you need and also keep your savings that you've been working so hard for, instead of just having the cash because you collapse those investments. From the lender's perspective, also, personal investments are sometimes not recorded as shareholder equity on the financial statements of the business, and so they're actually not taken into consideration. So I hear that often, but I've put all this money into my business, but we can't visibly see it in the statements. Cashing in personal savings also could indicate risk of poor financial management or insufficient cash flow. And once you cash in the savings on your home or equity, well, then it can't be used as collateral against the loan. So when you need it, you may not actually be able to borrow the amount that you need. So the biggest question that your banker wants to know is, are you an acceptable risk? Now, every lender is looking for key criteria when assessing you and your business. I'm showing you the BDC model, which we call the 5 C's, but you're going to find something very similar at any of our sister organizations as well as the major charter banks. So character, that's the first one. So we want to know, do you have the management skills, the experience, and the track record to deliver on your business plan? And it could be you or your management team. Do you have the capacity, the ability to repay the loan? And so we're looking at your track record in handling credit as well as the company's cash flow. In terms of capital, a lender will use various ratios and measures to evaluate your current and past financial performance. There's also the conditions or the terms and conditions of your loan, and these are designed to make sure that the financial institution's risk is acceptable throughout the whole repayment period. And then finally, collateral, which I've already mentioned today. And so again, this is when the lender wants to evaluate the assets you're willing to pledge as collateral to secure the loan. Again, in the event that you're unable to repay. But I want to remind you that you have built out a great business plan. You've got appendices showing your marketing plan. You've got your cash flow plan to go along with this. There's a lot of confidence to reduce that risk, and that's why those are important elements. When you do go to look for a loan, I highly recommend you shop around. Ask different conditions, different account managers, find out what their area of specialty is. The other thing you want to take into consideration, be really clear on what your objectives are. You want to know what your needs are, your total cost of your project. You also want to do your homework and figure out, what could you afford to repay? Again, a cash flow planner, financial projections. These are just tools to help you think that through. The last thing I want to mention on this, well, I guess there's 2 things. One of them is it's important to know what the terms and conditions to expect. Entrepreneurs are really focused on the interest rate when they first come to talk to us. But I just want to remind you that's only one element in the equation. You actually might be reducing your ability to negotiate for flexibility. So really take some consideration, look at the seasonality of your business, look at the different options that are available to you. And don't forget that interest payments are tax deductible. And the last thing I would say, because I couldn't be a development banker without saying it, is to always turn in your financial statements on time to the bank each time once you do have a loan. It really shows and builds towards that relationship and that transparency with your banker. Now, I come from a consulting and operations background, as you heard. And so when I first started as a development banker, I found some of the terms a little bit overwhelming. With over 300 definitions, the BDC Glossary is designed to help you better understand the terms that you're going to come across daily while running your business. The glossary, which you can see from the slide, is available in both French and English. It's a great resource to use. There's also free courses specifically around financial management, cash flow, how to get a loan, how to talk to your banker, so that you can feel more confident when you're dealing with your accountant and your bank. And I'll be sure to include links to those in the chat. Now, our mission at BDC is to help create and develop Canadian businesses by offering financing, capital, and advisory services, mainly to small and medium-sized enterprises across Canada. BDC provides business loans and advice to help thousands of entrepreneurs just like you to manage their finances. So if you think we can help, please do not hesitate to give us a call or visit us online. And on that note, my goodness, bdc.ca has more than 1,000 articles, videos, tools, all about different business topics. I've mentioned a couple today. Again, I'm going to pop those into the chat, but I absolutely encourage you to come and check it out. It's all free and really fabulous advice. So that's it from me, Kayla. I'll turn it back over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brooke, for all of those insights. And I want to thank everyone for their comments in the chat function. 100%. We want to be looking at fundamentals for those that are early stage in this business, but we'll make sure moving forward that we're exceptionally clear about which stages that we're engaging in for these types of sessions. So thank you for the feedback. You're welcome to send more to Startup Canada. Our colleague Angela can take all of those insights behind the scenes. But we're really intending here to give as many resources as possible. So from organizations like BDC, looking at loans, looking at those financial options, and then jumping into our fantastic panel to review additional finance options. So we're hoping that across all of these fabulous guests, we can get that information your way. So without further ado, I will love to introduce our panelists for today. We'll be jumping into Q&As later. So I have seen a couple of questions coming in for Brooke asking for specifics. We'll get to those at the very end of the session. We are joined with three great panelists for today's session, starting with Magnolia Perron. Magnolia is the Indigenous Women and Youth Program Officer at the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. She's responsible for implementing NACCA's new initiative to increase the number of Indigenous women and youth engaging in entrepreneurship and business development in Canada. She holds a master's in Indigenous nationhood at the University of Victoria and a graduate diploma in Indigenous policy and administration from Carleton University. Magnolia is from the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory and a proud member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. I would now like to introduce our second panelist, Sahar Ansary. Sahar has assisted hundreds of small to large organizations across Canada with non-dilutive funding for over 10 years and has led work on over $75 million in related claims. She specializes in identifying and optimizing the technical and financial aspects of various funding programs, maximizing overall tax credits, and managing major accounts. She has significant experience in the aerospace, medical device, and software industries. Sahar also co-founded Fundica.com, a successful online platform intelligently identifying government and other funding for entrepreneurs, where she led product development from ideation to launch. So we'll hear some great tips from Sahar as well. Last but certainly not least, we have Hannah Cree. Hannah catalyzes conversations into action with her storytelling and humor, advocating for heart-centered humanity practices in business. She's the co-founder of Common Good and Venture in Residence at SheEO, currently living and playing on Treaty 6 and 7 land in Alberta. Start making good more common together and discover more at commongood.community and SheEO.world. Links will be popped in the chat for our audience. We are so thankful for everyone joining us today. And so let's get started with our fabulous panelists. So we're going to kick things off with just a bit about your organization. For those on the call who have never heard of these three entities, let's kick things off with Magnolia from NACCA. Walk us through what NACCA does for women entrepreneurs.
Sure. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and hi, everyone. So for those of you who are not familiar, NACCA, the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, we're a national organization, an umbrella organization for 59 Aboriginal financial institutions across Canada. And Aboriginal financial institutions, also known as AFIs. So if you hear me say AFIs, that's what I'm referring to. They are autonomous, Indigenous controlled, community-based financial organizations. We are located all across Canada in every province and territory, and we provide financing and business services supports to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit entrepreneurs across Canada. And so at NACCA, we represent the network. We advocate for them at a national level. We act as a unified voice. We support in terms of capacity development, so providing tools and resources to the network. And we also administer some of the programming. So the Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program that's administered through NACCA to the Aboriginal financial institutions, and of course out to the entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Magnolia, and welcome to today's panel. Hannah, let's pass it over to you from SheEO. Walk us through your organization and what type of funding you provide for women entrepreneurs.
Yes, thank you. SheEO is a community of radically generous women, thousands of women who gift their money into a perpetual fund. And so I'm an activator and I'm also a SheEO venture. That means my venture has been funded by SheEO. And that fund lends that money out to women-led ventures at a 0% interest rate. And ventures, it's a way different process. We don't look at your credit history, all of those things. It's about your business, what you're doing. And it's loaned out over 5 years, but really it's more about the community. We have thousands of women that are in the community that are ready to become your customers, your advisors, and have your back and grow those pieces. It has single-handedly changed my business, especially through COVID, the support that I've received through Ask and Give, all of those pieces. So whether you're an entrepreneur and looking at venture funding, but also just become an activator. There are learning circles. We're doing a marketing one today. There's so many different pieces on getting involved. And why I love this model is that it's outside of anything that's traditional. These women are literally gifting their money. They are not getting a tax receipt or anything. They're gifting this money and it goes into a fund that it lives well beyond us because it's perpetual. Now in Canada, we have we've gone into our 5 years. And so we have a perpetual fund that is here to fund women forever. And that will only keep going. And we also got a great matching partner that came along this year with BMO. And so we funded all of our semi-finalists and we'll fund probably 30 more next year too. So very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. And last but not least, Sahar. So not necessarily funding that you're allocating specifically, but walk us through what Fundica is.
Yes, thanks, Kayla. So basically what Fundica is, it's an online platform that allows for the identification of different sources of funding for entrepreneurs. So the idea is an entrepreneur goes on the website, so you go directly on fundica.com and you put in some information on the company. So it's really like a filter. You put in, your postal code, the size of the company, the industry you're in, and based on some of, those basic information and criteria, it'll search and provide you with a list of funding opportunities. So things like grants, tax credits, loans, loan guarantees, as well as some accelerators and advisors that would be available to you. We also have a filter. So there's secondary filters where you can also identify yourself as a woman, and it will then filter in and more specifically identify funding that might be available for women entrepreneurs or women-led companies. So it's really a tool for all of you that are thinking about, what funding is available, what can I leverage? And so you go on Fundica and it allows you, it's really a search engine that identifies everything that could be available to you. So my perspective is a little bit different today, but I will try to, complement and add where relevant.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sahar. So Magnolia from NACCA, can you give us a little bit more crunchy details about the types of funding that you offer? What are you looking for? What types of ventures or opportunities do women entrepreneurs have through your network?
Yeah, good question. So most of our AFIs are developmental lenders. We provide financing to Indigenous entrepreneurs. We have a couple AFIs that do offer some women-specific funds and programming. So for example, Indian Business Corporation out in Alberta, they have a women's loan fund launched in 2016, really with the intention of increasing women, First Nations women, access to capital. And so the intention was also by having a dedicated women's fund that they could also collect more data to better identify what the needs were, what the outcomes were facing First Nation women. And so their current fund value is at $5 million with an average loan size of around $110,000. And they support women in all different sectors, mainly in agriculture, energy and equipment, retail and construction. And actually since starting the program, their loan portfolio, so the number of women that they're supporting has gone 5% to 45%. We also have Clarence Campo Development Fund in Saskatchewan. They have a women's business development program that launched initially in 2012. And initially it started out as a microloan program to support Métis women who were starting smaller part-time, maybe home-based micro businesses. Since then, they redesigned the program. So they now provide interest-free loans up to $100,000. They also recognize that often women may not have the equity, the money to invest into their business. So they redesigned it, reduced the equity to 2%. And really the intention is to help Métis women in Saskatchewan either establish a new business, purchase an existing business, or to expand or renovate their business. And so at NACCA, in my role, we support the network to help them build their capacities to support women entrepreneurs. So we're doing that through research reports on Indigenous women's entrepreneurship. We're developing different business tools and resources, such as financial capability workbooks and self-assessment guides. We also developed workshops for Indigenous women who want to start a business that are being delivered by our AFI network. And we're also doing things like developing training and a role model campaign to spotlight successful Indigenous women entrepreneurs. And another thing we're working on is developing a microloan program. So we know many women tend to start smaller home-based or part-time businesses. They don't want to take on a lot of debt. So we're developing a microloan program that will hopefully be delivered through our network.
Fantastic. That's more to come. That's wonderful. From NACCA to Magnolia. Thank you so much. Hannah, walk us through, this fund and the availability of SheEO. Walk us through what the process is to actually receive this type of funding and what types of ventures receive the funding from SheEO.
Yeah, we are really focused on women-led businesses, 51% owned, and also that you are working on what we call the world's to-do list, which is really the United Nations Sustainable Goals, a business that has good built into it, which majority of women are already building. We need new businesses and new ways of doing things. And what I love about this model is that the activators who give their money are the ones that vote on the ventures. It's a democratic process. And so they are voting on the ventures and the businesses that they want to see in the world. And that is a really different shift on that. Also, 10 questions about your business and for the application to go through. So very different process. In Canada, we will be starting the next round. We just announced our first 23, which is the most ever. We literally went from 5 to 23 this year. And now we're over 107 ventures globally, which is amazing. And so this is going to all start up again in the next couple of months, going through the application process and the ventures voting. You also get access to this network of thousands of women. We have a great Ask Give kind of platform that goes along with it. We do learning circles. The ventures, the activators can get involved as much as they want in terms of providing advisor. And we also have coaching and all of those other different pieces. For me, I know there's a lot of things that I'm seeing in chat about pre-seed and investors and how do I do that? And as an entrepreneur, I've raised money for my own business and gone through this. I've worked for an angel piece. I've built an accelerator. And here's what I have to say to the entrepreneurs at the seed stage and at the beginning, especially for women. These systems and these funding models that are generally out there are not set up for us. They aren't built for us. They are built on old funding models of credit and assets, things that women generally don't have. And so this is not, I actually don't believe that we need to empower women. Women actually intrinsically know how to build businesses because we know how to build communities. We know how to build families. And that's what our businesses are. They are communities. And so my biggest piece of advice is get into relationship with people. For 5 years before I built this business, I was in the startup community, volunteering with Startup Canada, building an accelerator, going into the angel investors. The reason why I got any investors to begin with was because they knew me and they trusted me and they saw me show up. And so this is about businesses are entrepreneurs are community builders. So get in there, get into relationship with people before you need the money, get to know the different organizations, but also just go find your customers. Honestly, at the startup stage, there's not a lot of funding out there. Plus you're dealing with all the barriers that women have to face in funding. Find your customers and focus in on there and build those relationships. And you will have to bootstrap this. This is what entrepreneur life is. And we're going through COVID and there's not as much funding as there was before. Sure, there's lots of different stories that are funds that are popping up, but we're still basing them off of old funding models that we actually know don't work and put a bet on the top 1% always. And women are building different types of businesses that don't need to have hockey sticks. And so I just really, please go find your customers, get into relationship with people, and things will change. Things will change.
You're getting some fantastic love in the chat function there, Hannah. I think everyone's picking up what you're laying down. And I love this, that, not every woman entrepreneur is looking for a hockey stick. Like just that type of growth and that model is not actually what everybody wants. And we need to be building different systems. And I think, all of these panelists that we have today are actively looking at these spaces. How can we champion this narrative, across the board? But thank you for so beautifully articulating that vision. And SheEO, lives that every day, in addition to many of our other partners. So thanks for that, Hannah. Sahar, in terms of what you're seeing with Fundica and with the government grants and subsidies, Hannah briefly mentioned the funding situation because of COVID has changed dramatically. What are you seeing in terms of access for women entrepreneurs, usage, the types of support that they're receiving? Walk us through what you're seeing on your end.
Yeah, definitely. I think the landscape definitely has changed. If we were talking 5-10 years ago, I would say that criteria for searching for programs that are specifically for women would have been much smaller in terms of the list. Now there's been a push over the last, I would say, maybe a little bit over a couple of years of really focusing and trying to empower that group. So there are more opportunities and there's more being announced, but now it's about how effective will it be, how can we identify and leverage those in the right ways. I think there's more and more, and today is just another example of that, right? Us all coming together, and I think it is because of women entrepreneurs pushing for it and creating those communities, as Hannah just mentioned, to really create these opportunities for ourselves.
And we're already getting a couple of questions in the Q&A for you, Sahar. So in terms of Fundica, do you have an up-to-date database of all non-dilutive and private funding options spread out across Canada throughout also the 3 levels of government? How comprehensive is this database?
That's right. That's the idea. So we're trying to be as comprehensive as possible. We have a team of both data analysts as well as some intelligence that scrapes the internet and identifies, any news sources. So it's meant to be, comprehensive and up to date, because I think that's the challenge. It's constantly evolving as new budgets come out, as new programs, new, organizations come out with new programs. The idea is to keep it as up to date as possible and across Canada, across all levels of government. So when you go in, you put in your criteria, you'll see that in an initial list, and it'll have, yes, the grants, all the non-dilutive, as well as we have a list of venture capitalists, angel investors, as well as advisors. And then as new programs are added, you go back, you'll see those, as well as you'll get notifications.
Oh, and what about pitch competition? Somebody just asked a great question.
Yeah, so I would say that's, they come and go a lot. So it's harder to be constantly up to date with those, but as much as possible, yeah, we put those in and they go into kind of the contests section.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sahar. So Magnolia, what are some of the examples of businesses that have been funded through some of your institutions and your partners in the past? Like walk us through so we can visualize what these ventures look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to date, the network of Aboriginal financial institution has provided over $3 billion in total financing to over 50,000 businesses. So there's lots of great examples out there. I'm thinking of, so with our role model campaign, we've just highlighted about 17 women-owned businesses, and one that's coming to mind is Lisa Organ, and she owns Frozen Dreams in Whitehorse in the Yukon. And so she went to Denene Ventures, the Aboriginal financial institution in her region, and she applied for their microloan program. And so through that, she was able to start her commercial bakery based out of her home, where she offers delicious sugar-free and low-carb treats. And she's actually, since COVID, she has been able to pivot her business a bit to offer, online, delivery only and no contact pickup and do-it-yourself cookie kits and things like that. So she's a really great example. I'm also thinking about another client of one of our Aboriginal financial institutions out on Vancouver Island, the Primal Sisters. So they make like gluten-free and low-carb pork crisps, and they're a client of NACCA, which is our Aboriginal financial institution on the island there. So they were able to access support and get funding to start their business. They needed initially, the first loan was to purchase their father's property and build their commercial kitchen there. And they're a really great example because they've been able to employ they were able to purchase their dad's farm. He was able to retire, help out in the business. They were able to employ, it's two sisters that own the business. They were able to employ their children in the business, and they've just been really successful as well, and really highlights the great work that our AFIs are doing to support Indigenous women.
Incredible, Magnolia. Those are two really, really great illustrations. Thank you for that. Hannah, what about SheEO Ventures? Walk us through some of your, not favorites, that's not quite the right word, but some notable women entrepreneurs that have been supported.
Oh, the first one that comes to mind is Patrice of Satya, and she's just incredible out of Vancouver. A great story about single mom, no assets. Out of her crock pot, she creates a salve from her Indigenous wisdom that can heal eczema, also approved by Health Canada, but no one would fund her because of all of those traditional pieces. Comes along to SheEO, barely has 50K in revenue, and is now in hundreds of stores, is exporting, and all of that because also the women at SheEO are opening up doors, right? Of saying, hey, I can get you into indigo. I can get you into this. I have connections here and there. And so that one is definitely top of mind. She's a very inspirational person to look at. Oh, there's so many to look at in terms of like all the ventures of what they're doing. And the other thing I want to kind of point out about women looking for other funding is we are forgetting that our own buying power really holds a lot. We are 51% of the population. We hold 80% of the buying power in the world. We can single-handedly change our systems if we tap into our own power. And not only that is that women are in the process of inheriting the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the world. So what this means is women are not actually your typical, they're not sitting at angel investors. The majority of them that have some money are not actually sitting in these typical funding structures. This is why I'm a big fan of just getting into relationship with people, going out for coffee, asking. Right now, just take a minute and think about the 5 greatest people in your network, and then go to them and ask them to introduce you to 5 more really cool people that that they think would be your best person to talk to. Those are the little things we can do, because where I've gotten my money is over coffee. And when you ask for money first, you will usually get mentorship. And if you ask for mentorship and some advice first, somewhere down that road, there's going to be money that happens. And so be careful where or how you kind of broach these conversations. For me, I'm always like, where are the 5 coolest people? Who do I need to talk to? Don't send me an email about picking my brain. I hate that. It's not about picking brains. It's about getting into relationship, because you also have something to share too, right? There's never been a conversation I've been involved in another entrepreneur where I haven't also learned something too. So like power with instead of power over. And get into relationship with people, because women they will be investing, but they're going to be investing in untraditional ways, which is exactly what we need. This is exactly what we need.
Incredible. Thank you. Sorry, Hannah, I'm taking all these notes. That's, power with, not power over. I love that. That's my post-it note of the day. I love that, Hannah. Thanks for sharing. Sahar, walk us through some usage, maybe case studies of entrepreneurs that have used Fundica really successfully and potentially scaled their businesses or supported their businesses.
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea with Fundica is really to help you, from that really early stage, but through that growth. So the idea is to come in, and often when we're first starting out, and I believe, one of the best ways to leverage it is to look at that non-dilutive. So those grants, those accelerators. So both looking at, finding those funds through those grants, but remembering that, the grants will always be complementary to some investment that you're going to be making yourself. So typically grants will not cover 100% of the expenses. It'll be complementary. So they'll come in at 50, 60, 70%, but that can really help you boost and take your investment to the next level. So we've seen many companies come in and women-led ones, and I won't name any names because I haven't confirmed with them, but I will say that, they'll come in, they'll look at the grant landscape, they have their initial love money that we call, their own investment from their surroundings, leverage that with some other grants, and then participate in some of these really great accelerator programs as well that can really help you in terms of, building that community, the mentoring. Often, when we're coming into this space, we may not, we have very good skills that are specific maybe to the financial side, maybe to the technical side, maybe just to the space that we're in, but we don't know everything, right, as much as we'd like to. So that mentorship becomes quite important. The team that you build around yourself as well, this is a good way to connect with other like-minded individuals as well. So I would say they go with those grants, they get into some of these great accelerators that then create some momentum, and then allow them to go into more of, further growth through some interesting either lower interest government loans, other interesting loans and loan guarantees. And then, and this is the path I kind of see for it, you go towards the, venture capital, angel financing. This is kind of a nice pathway to really then go further with it. And again, you can always come back, kind of see, depending on where you're at, what can work for you. And maybe I didn't mention, but funding is totally free, right? So it's there, it's kind of available to you, and can kind of identify and help you, support you through that process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sahar. Yeah, we have a number of questions in the Q&A asking, is it free? So
absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. Usually I say it at the beginning, but.
And it's open to all entrepreneurs and businesses, not just women entrepreneurs, right? It's across the board, but you have specific sort of segments of women specific funding, right?
Right. So there's an extra filtering that can be done to specify that you're women. So we'll add in those. The only thing that it's constrained to is really for-profit companies. So I saw a little bit on the non-for-profit. That's kind of outside the scope, whole other world of funding. But yeah, we're kind of focused on the for-profit.
Great clarification. That's important. In terms of, I hate using the word mistakes, but challenges that women entrepreneurs face in the process of applying for funding. Often we hear an immense frustration in not being successful in getting funding and having no idea why. And then potentially making these similar types of mistakes over and over because you don't know, where you might be going wrong in some of these applications or some of these processes. Magnolia, do you have any thoughts or recommendations based on entrepreneurs that you've supported, things that they should be really crystal clear on, areas to really invest more energy into, and maybe some common, I'm trying to find a new word for mistakes, but common areas that people might need some extra support on?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just start off. So in our research on Indigenous women's entrepreneurship, when we did a national survey of Indigenous women entrepreneurs, and 78% said that they started their business with personal savings. And they identified access to capital as the top challenge. And so we know that women have more difficulty accessing financing because of eligibility requirements, such as having equity, having collateral, a proven credit history, being able to invest full-time in the business when they're trying to balance other responsibilities. There's not a lot of microloans available for those who are starting part-time or smaller businesses. And then you have additional layers of gender bias and discrimination on top of that. So I just want to start by acknowledging that. So some of those things are outside of your control, and it's not that you're making mistakes or doing anything wrong. But from, I guess, the perspective of NACCA and our AFIs, so we're, as developmental lenders, we typically assess applications based on business viability. And that's mainly done through looking at the business plan and cash flow projection. So I really think that's a big area, a really important area to focus on if you are applying for financing. And there's lots of different supports out there. You can hire consultants if you wanted to help write your business plan. And I know from conversations I've been in, if you're involved in writing your business plan, that's so much better. It really should be a roadmap to your business. You want to know it inside out. It should grow and change over time. So I think that's a really important area that women entrepreneurs can focus on when they're looking for financing. And then also our AFIs, we're character-based lenders as well. So beyond looking at things like credit checks and so on, we also consider one's character. And so with that, I would say, and this I think goes to what Hannah was saying about establishing relationships. So I think whether it's with other women or with financial institutions, such as our network of Aboriginal financial institutions, it's always better to start that relationship early. And so that would be my second piece of recommendation. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Magnolia. Thank you. Hannah, and Brooke actually just sent me a quick message, positioning it as not knowings, not mistakes. So that is a great thing I think we can all learn from today. Thank you so much for that, Brooke. So things in terms of not knowings when applying, you mentioned that the SheEO fund is 10 questions, but how did you potentially get to those 10 questions, or walk us through some of these not knowings that women entrepreneurs struggle with when applying for funding?
I mean, I think the difference is that SheEO was set up by Vicky Saunders, who is an entrepreneur, right? And so knows exactly and has gone through funding and growing her company and stock market, all of those things. So she understood all of the questions that she's been asked. But there's a bigger piece here around, there's when only 2.2% of venture capital funding goes to women and 0.0006% to Black women, and our Indigenous sisters are not even being tracked. This is statistically impossible without biases set up in our systems, like just automatically. And so if you are pale and male or a man, you are going to get funding. And these are set up across all of our systems. So it calls for new models and new mindsets. And that's why really SheEO was created, to create new models and new mindsets. And when I think about women, I've said this before, I don't believe we need to be empowered. I don't think we need to change the way we share our companies, or any of those things. We don't need to be fitting into the system that is intrinsically, some people would say broken. I think it's working exactly the way it was set up to work. But what needs to happen is, what I do see out of applications is that across the board, this is not a woman's issue. Entrepreneurs need to get really, really clear on what it is they're doing without having to go into a 20-minute detailed process of everything. And so it's like, what are you here to do? And who is your target customer? And do not apologize. Your target customer is not everyone, and it should be a very clear subset, and go after that market. And so that's one of those things, is like getting really clear on what you're here to do, what you're passionate about. I remember on stage, and I'm not a big fan of the pitch event because, it puts entrepreneurs against each other. It's a winner takes all mindset, when we need to be funding lots of different types of organizations and businesses across the board, all of those types of things. But what I do see, I remember being on stage and pitching, and I had people come up to me afterwards and be like, I don't know exactly what you're doing, except that I love your passion and I'm in. So get back into your passion of why you're really doing this. Either what the problem you're trying to solve or the things that are going to happen. And when you show up with passion, and when you show up knowing exactly what you're here to do and not apologizing for it, you will find the people. And the people that say no to you are not your people. And stop trying to, we are not here to knock down doors and go over big mountains and beat it into them that they should be with me. I spend zero time on the people that don't get it anymore. Zero time. because there are people that get it. We are changing. And actually, if anything, and COVID destroyed my business. Let's be clear. COVID destroyed my business, and COVID is the best thing that ever happened to me because it got me really clear on what my passion is, what my purpose is, and I no longer waste time on people that don't get it. So find your people.
There you go. Find your people, everyone. I think the chat is also exploding with support again, Hannah. So I think that's really resonating with a lot of people here today. And I love, these types of panels are intended to bring diversity of perspective, shake things up, hear, the thoughts of other entrepreneurs, others that are working, in more traditional organizations, in less traditional organizations. The funding landscape, there's so many different pieces to it. We're making changes. We're seeing different disruptors like SheEO pop up. But the full picture is really interesting, I think, also to see 2021, where we stand now. A year from now, this could be a completely different conversation. So lots to explore there. Sahar, any other feedback on not knowings or other things that you think would be helpful for our audience today to have in their back pocket or in the back of their head?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think kind of piggybacking off of what Hannah just said in terms of kind of knowing your customer, knowing your audience, knowing what your product is and where you're going with it. So the idea is to kind of map it out for yourself. But also when you're going and applying for funding, there may be grants, there may be loans, there may be venture capitalists that are interested in or that are providing funding for a specific, type of activity, for a specific need, but that's not aligned with what you're looking to do. That's not part of your roadmap. And I've seen one too many entrepreneurs kind of try to mold themselves to that. So try to fit within that, forgetting, what their roadmap was to start with. So I think one important thing is to see what is available that's complementary to your vision, to your roadmap, that comes and really supports that, rather than the opposite. So rather than saying, okay, there's a grant, there's a large grant available, and it's kind of what I was thinking of maybe doing. So maybe I'll just do that. And if I get the grant, I'll do that. So I think staying focused is an important one. Likewise with who you partner with in terms of investors. So whether it's an angel or a venture capitalist or, other types of love money, it's to make sure that they're aligned, so allowing to propulse you forward, not into different direction. Sometimes, it makes sense, and you may get some very good mentorship and advice that leans you in certain ways, but making sure to think about it before you do it. So analyze that situation, analyze the criteria for the funding that you're applying for, first of all, to make sure there's a fit there, but mostly also to make sure there's a fit with your overall vision makes sense. Would be something that I would highlight.
Exactly. And that's what I love about Fundica. It gives you all of the access points, all of the information, and then you can use those as your guiding posts about who you're actually going to connect with. So just that initial exercise is challenging. You don't want to spend all your time just Googling, what is out there. That funneling, I think, is really a time saver. So we've got a lot of questions coming through. Holy moly. So we'll try to get through them over the next 7 minutes. Brooke, you're welcome to jump back into the Q&A section. So I'll just jump in. In terms of government loans, funds, opportunities for newcomer women who are looking to start their businesses, specifically this person's asking about in Ontario, tech engineering software, any of our panelists, do you have any thoughts on specific funds or opportunities for newcomer women? Go ahead, Sahar.
So sorry, it was newcomer tech in Ontario. Was that right?
Correct. So maybe we start with just newcomer, and then we can add in that.
Okay. So I don't have any specifically for newcomer. I had it for the latter portion of that. I don't know if anybody else does. Off the top of my head, obviously, I'm sure there are.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of fund, I can jump in. So in terms of funding, I would say I'm not familiar with a specific financing product for newcomers necessarily, but I do know that there's some of the resources that are available for newcomers. I'm thinking of Access, for example, and that would be a great place to start because they're connected. Each ecosystem has and micro opportunities that are not necessarily well known. That's one of the challenges with trying to find opportunities for funding. You really sort of do have to have that relationship and know who to know. So I would suggest reaching out to some of the organizations that support newcomers as an opportunity to connect in with them. The other thing I'll suggest is for FedDev, if you're in, within the Ontario system, within Southern Ontario, but more broadly, FedDev has their small business solutions for all of Ontario, and they have both a hotline there, fabulous at being able to source grant opportunities. It's part of one of their free services that they offer, and they've put together a whole report for you. So absolutely suggest reaching out to Fed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brooke. Shivangi has a great question about building connections. So Hannah, I'm going to send this one over to you. How do you recommend actually building connections during isolation, during COVID, when you have a very, very early stage idea? Where do you start at a time like this?
I think you, first of all, look at the industry that you're in, all of those pieces, but really it's just, what are the types of events that you want to show up to? I would look on LinkedIn. You can search different industries and see if there's people that you want to connect with on LinkedIn. There's a varied response on how you can do that. And it's just relationship building, attending something like this, and then reaching out afterwards to see if you can have a 10-15-minute chat. Be really clear on what your ask is, though. Like, a lot of times I have a lot of people that reach out to me, but what is it that you actually want to talk about? What is your ask? What is it that you really need to know about your business? I might not be the person, right? I may not be your target market either to give you feedback on your business. And so just getting really clear on that. I think LinkedIn is a really underused resource, and you can do lots of great things around searching different people's industries and titles and all of those other pieces. Obviously at SheEO, we have activators, we have activator calls, we have learning circles. We do our best to actually do lots of breakout sessions so that people can connect one-on-one, and using those types of different services. But you never know until you ask, right? You just never know. And if it's a no or no response, honestly, sometimes it's just that people are really, really busy. Like, COVID is hard. Women are out of the workforce faster than ever. We've reverted back 30 years in a few months. So, a lot of women are also under an incredible amount of stress with children at home and everything else. But, the people that typically, also, I'll give you a tip, which will bury me. People that typically end up following up once or twice with me because I haven't been able to respond or whatever, usually I'll be like, oh yeah. So make a list of the people that you've reached out to, and then star the ones that you really want to hear from, and go after that.
That's a great piece of advice there, Hannah. Thank you. Brooke, a question over to you. What are the resources that you would recommend to learning more about financial literacy for business purposes? How to plan for reinvesting in your business, basic tax knowledge, etc. Where would you point them?
Two different resources. So in terms of financial literacy for business purposes, I would say definitely there's a link in the chat that I'd shared earlier. BDC has some free e-courses. Now, these are not in-depth necessarily. These are going to, I like to say, help you figure out some of the terms, some of the concepts that maybe you need more information on. So it's reaffirming what you know, a chance to figure out a little bit deeper of what you need to learn more about in order to feel confident in moving forward with your financial management. Free, available on bdc.ca in the Entrepreneur's Toolkit. The other one that I definitely recommend reaching out to is the CPA. It's the Canadian Professional Accounting designation, and they also offer a lot of free advice as well. So things like getting into basic tax knowledge, getting into reinvestment for your business. I mean, I would say that's out of the scope of mandate for BDC because those are important to your business, but they're not core to the business activity itself. It's sort of it is, but it's sort of around that. It's outside of our mandate. So that's another great resource to tap into. So definitely CPA. And if you are talking to an accountant about that information, make sure they do have their CPA designation.
Great point there, Brooke. Great point. Magnolia, any other financial literacy resources or business tools from NACCA or the AFIs?
Yeah, so NACCA, we just completed a series of financial capability workbooks. So we have 3 workbooks that we just did. They are more of a focus on introduction to personal finance, but really helpful. I mean, your personal finance, the skills that you have there can be easily applied to your business. We're currently working on we actually co-developed those with the Native Women's Association of Canada, so I should mention that. We're working on developing right now a business canvas model and an entrepreneurial toolkit for women, and then we hope to do another series of financial capability workbooks that focus more on the business aspect. But I was thinking CPA Canada as well is a great resource, and I know BDC as well has lots to offer.
Amazing. Well, we are at time, and this has just completely flown by. And I know to our audience, we've just scratched the surface here. There are so many different layers of this conversation we could go into more detail on, and we will be trying to have more of these conversations. And I just want to actually really thank everyone for your candid feedback in this chat function. Like, we need to hear what would be more helpful, how we can be better. I really want to send my appreciation for sending those thoughts, because that'll really help inform a lot of our programming moving forward. So we are going to pop up a quick poll very quickly just to get your feedback to help us really refine some of our programming moving forward. I want to thank all of our panelists today. Brooke, thank you so much for that 101 session at the beginning. Sahar, Magnolia, and Hannah, thank you for all of these resources, all of these tips. We know you're incredibly passionate about what you're doing, as are we. So we really thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with all of our attendees today. Thank you, everyone, for spending the last hour with us. We do have additional one-on-one mentorship opportunities if you're looking for some additional support with groups like BDC. We have representation from NACCA as well, from Fundica, and I believe actually from SheEO, I think from a number of these organizations. So you're welcome to seek out a half-hour check-in and just get some feedback and get some ideas from people within a trusted network. So we'll be sending that through as well. Final thank you to our partners, Sovereign Insurance, BDC, as well as UPS, Scotiabank, Inniskillen, PayPal, and EDC. Holy moly, fabulous partners. Thank you so much for all the work that you do with Startup Canada and with our community. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. And we're here to support. Let us know how we can help moving forward. We're always here. Have a great day. Bye.